One psychology tip that I loved kind of talking about it, kind of you can try to find ways to go in it with scarcity, but really it's the cognitive dissonance of it all, right? And what that is just like this feeling of mental discomfort that results from holding two conflicting beliefs, right? And for example, if you in like there's this really popular ad from Thailand a couple of years ago. It's like the most popular anti-smoking ad where basically, are you familiar with this
I don't think so.
one?
Tell me.
Well, it's really interesting because they have all these people on the streets and they're smoking, and then these two kids come by. It's a little boy or a little girl, and they have a cigarette and they want a light, and they ask the adults, can I get a light? And the adults are like, you can't, no, that you shouldn't do this. This is bad for you, right? And then like, so they keep getting turned down, but then the kid gives them this card, and it just says, if why are you basically, I'll paraphrase, it's like, if you're telling me not to smoke, why are you doing it?
Yeah.
Right. And so then there's this number on the back that they can call. And like majority of the people, like a high majority of the people ended up calling that number to talk about how they can quit smoking. And it just was really impactful. And I just look at it as such a good example of like, if smoking can cause lung cancer, but you smoke anyway, like that's cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
And I think there's ways that we can do that in copy as well. How I like to refer to it as like closing the best self gap. So we want this behavior, we have these beliefs of who our best self is, but then we're not doing those things as well. And so some examples that I have here, and I may have touched on it, like, do you struggle with skipping workouts, right? Because you want to get healthy, but then you skip them and like, I'll do it tomorrow, right? So like that right there, that line is a good way to tap into that cognitive dissonance, to grab their attention right away, and keep them reading, because you're triggering what that question is the discomfort from the reader that they want to get in shape, but the skipping the workouts is one of the hard parts.
And there's
right?
like a little bit of guilt in that. So they kind of feel like, hey, I feel really bad about this. And he understands me speaking my language. So maybe I should definitely read this and see if it'll help.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you can even just continue to tap into like down the page or some of your other copy. Another example I use that I can think of is like, if you want to write your website in 10 days, like if you're offering that as a service, what you can do is like, you can kindly commit to a timeline and with step-by-step guide to write a website that converts, right? Like you're answering these things that like cause them to not do this behavior that they believe that they can achieve. So I think that's pretty interesting. And, a big one too for brands is, from a cognitive dissonance standpoint, is like, I look at it as like, let's say real estate agents, and like on their website, they're like, we have the best deals in the city, and they use dollar signs as the S, and they're like this luxury real estate agent. Well, like that right there is just forming this cognitive dissonance from your desired audience who can spend almost like millions of dollars on a home. It's like, well, now you look cheap and you're trying to sound like fun and cool, but it's not necessarily for me. So that's just something to be aware of as well. Like, I'm all about writing how your customers speak and using customer language. But again, it goes back to knowing as much about your audience as possible.